The dust in the St. Ambrose Metropolitan Library had a particular scent, one that Elara Vance had come to think of as the perfume of forgotten stories. It was a mixture of aging paper, brittle leather, and the faint, sweet tang of wood polish that hadn't been properly applied since the 1970s. As the head librarian, she moved through the towering, canyon-like shelves of the history section with a sense of reverence, her fingers lightly brushing against the spines of books that hadn't been opened in decades. It was a quiet Tuesday, the kind of day where the only sounds were the slow, rhythmic tick of the grand oak clock and the soft whisper of the central heating. Elara was processing the overnight returns from the external Dropbox, a task she usually delegated but found oddly meditative. Most of the books were recent bestsellers, smelling of coffee and hurried reads. Then, her hand closed around something different. The book was heavy, bound in a deep green cloth that was faded almost to gray at the edges. The gold-embossed title, The Labyrinths of History, A Study of Forgotten Truths, was barely legible. The due date slip, a brittle rectangle of cardstock tucked inside its front cover, was a relic of a bygone era. Stamped in faded purple ink was a date, October 17, 1974. Elara's breath caught. 50 years. This book was half a century overdue. Mr. Finch, she called out, her voice echoing softly in the vast quiet. You're not going to believe this. Quote, a moment later, a small, wiry man with a shock of white hair and spectacles perched on the end of his nose emerged from the archive room. Mr. Finch, a volunteer at the library since before Elara was born, moved with a careful, deliberate grace. What's that, my dear? Another complaint about the modern poetry section? He asked, his voice a gentle rasp. Not quite, Elara said, holding up the book. Look at the due date. Quote, Mr. Finch adjusted his spectacles and leaned in. His bushy white eyebrows shot up towards his hairline. Good heavens. October 74. I was here then. You know, just a young man shelving philosophy. He took the book from her with a tenderness that bordered on awe. I remember this edition. We had a whole set. All lost to time, or so I thought. Quote, he opened the cover gently, and as he did, a small, square photograph, sepia-toned with age, fluttered out and spun to the floor like a falling leaf. Elara bent to retrieve it. It showed a young man with a wide, earnest smile and dark, intelligent eyes, his arm slung around a young woman who was laughing, her head thrown back. They were standing on the library's front steps, the very same granite ones Elara climbed every morning. He looks happy, Elara murmured, turning the photo over. On the back, in a neat, cursive hand, was written, Alistair and Clara, May, 74. Alistair. Mr. Finch repeated, the name a ghost on his lips. His face had gone pale. Alistair Pembroke. Quote, you know that name? Elara asked, a prickle of excitement running up her spine. Not personally, no, but it was a bit of a local legend. A university student, bright, from a good family. He borrowed a stack of books one afternoon in the autumn of 74 and vanished. Never seen again. The police investigated, of course, but it was a dead end. It was the talk of the library for years. Mr. Finch's eyes were distant, looking back through the decades. They thought he might have just run off, started a new life, or something worse. Quote, Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. She took the book back from Mr. Finch and began carefully turning the pages. At first, it seemed normal. Then, she saw them. Not marginalia in the traditional sense. No notes or underlining. Instead, there were tiny, precise symbols drawn in the same blue ink as the inscription on the photo. A small arrow in the margin of page 43, pointing to a paragraph about hidden chambers in medieval monasteries. On page 118. Next to a passage discussing ciphers used by Renaissance spies. Someone had drawn a tiny, intricate key. This isn't just a book he forgot to return. Mr. Finch, Elara whispered, her voice trembling with a sudden, fierce certainty. He was using it for a message. Quote. She flipped faster, her librarian's instincts taking over. The symbols were a trail, leading her through the dense academic text. An arrow here, a series of numbers there. A compass rose tucked into the corner of a map of ancient catacombs. It was a code, a breadcrumb trail left behind by a young man who knew he was in danger. He was a history student, Mr. Finch said, his own excitement growing. Brilliant, they said, especially with puzzles and codes. Quote. Elara's fingers stopped on a page near the end of the book. Tucked into the gutters, almost invisible, was a single, typewritten line on a yellowed slip of paper. It was a quote from the text, but with one crucial alteration. The printed text read, asterisk, the truth is often concealed not in the grand narrative, but in the architectural silence. Beneath it, the typed slip read, asterisk, the truth is concealed in the architectural silence. The capital letters were deliberate. Elara looked up, meeting Mr. Finch's wide-eyed gaze. The architectural silence. She repeated, that's not just a turn of phrase. It's a place, or a thing. Quote, but what? Mr. Finch asked, his voice barely a whisper. Elara's mind raced, connecting the clues, the arrows, the key, the capital letters. Her eyes swept across the library, from the soaring, vaulted ceiling to the labyrinthine shelves. She thought of the old blueprints she'd seen. The planned demolition of the East Wing to make way for a new digital media center. A wing that hadn't been significantly altered since it was built in 1920. I don't know, she said, a cold dread seeping into her excitement. But the demolition crews start on the East Wing in 48 hours. If the truth is hidden there, we're about to bury it under a pile of rubble. Quote,